The complete history of Bishop, the X-Man who could never escape the future. The X-Men were built on hope. Hope that humans and mutants could coexist. Hope that the future could still change. Hope that no matter how bad things became, tomorrow could still be better. But Bishop is what happens when somebody grows up after that hope has already failed. He wasn't raised inside Xavier's dream, he was raised inside its corpse. A world where mutants were hunted, branded, imprisoned, and raised. A world where giant sentinels, our mutant kind, slowly disappeared into history. Unlike most X-Men, Bishop never forgot what fear looked like. Today, we're breaking down the complete history of Bishop, his dystopian future, the Xavier security enforcers, his relationship with Shard, the Emplates, Trevor Fitzroy, Gambit, Onslaught, Messiah Complex, the Messiah War, and how fear slowly transformed Bishop from a survivor into a lunatic. Because Bishop isn't really a story about time travel, it's a story about trauma, and what happens when survival becomes somebody's entire worldview. Bishop first appeared in Uncanny X-Men chapter 282 in 1991. He was created by Whilce Portacio and John Byrne during the peak of the X-Men explosion in the early 90s, and immediately Bishop stood out, not just because of the look, but because of the energy surrounding him. Most X-Men still carried some level of optimism. Even Wolverine, underneath all the rage, still had humanity. Bishop felt different, colder, more militarized. The giant futuristic weapons, the tactical posture, the constant seriousness. Everything about Bishop looked like someone who had survived war for most of his life. And honestly, that's exactly what made him compelling. Because Bishop didn't feel like a superhero, he felt like the aftermath of one. And beyond that, Bishop was also one of Marvel's first major black male X-Men during a period where representation inside superhero comics was still extremely limited, which made his introduction even more impactful. But the most important thing about Bishop was in his design. It was a future that created him. Bishop came from one of the darkest timelines in X-Men history, a future where mutants no longer fought for equality, they fought for survival. Sentinels controlled society, mutants were imprisoned in camps, entire generation grew up under fear and oppression, and mutants were permanently marked with an M tattoo over their eye. That mark wasn't symbolic, it was ownership. A branding system used to identify mutant powers. And that single detail tells you almost everything about Bishop psychologically. Because unlike Xavier's students, Bishop didn't grow up believing humanity could change. He grew up watching hatred become normalized, watching fear become law, watching mutants slowly disappear while the world accepted it. That kind of environment doesn't create idealists, it creates survivors. And eventually, it created the Xavier security enforcers. As Bishop grew older, he and his sister Shard became members of XSE, the Xavier Security Enforcers. They were essentially mutant law enforcement operating inside a collapsing future society. This era of Bishop's history gets explored much deeper in XSE chapters 1 through 5 and the times in life of Lucas Bishop. And these stories are incredibly important because they show how Bishop became the man who we know. The XSE wasn't designed to create dreamers, it trained soldiers. Emotion became secondary, survival became priority. Everything was tactical, structured, and militarized. And over time, Bishop became obsessed with discipline and control because chaos was the thing that destroyed the world he grew up in. But the really important part here is Shard. Because even though Bishop and Shard experienced the same future, they evolved differently. Shard stayed emotionally grounded, compassionate, and spiritually centered. Bishop hardened himself emotionally, because Bishop believed compassion got people killed. And that contrast between the siblings becomes one of the defining emotional themes of his entire story. Because Shard represents the humanity Bishop slowly loses over time. One of the darkest influences on Bishop's early life involved encounters connected to the Emplates. Now, if you don't know who Emplate is, he is one of the most disturbing mutant villains Marvel ever created. He is a parasitic mutant who feeds on the marrow and life force of other mutants, and his victims become twisted, vampiric servants. Bishop and Shard encountering threats like this at a young age completely shaped how they viewed mutation itself. Because Bishop never experienced mutation as something beautiful, he experienced it as a danger, as a horror, and a survival. And psychologically, this matters a lot, because many X-Men see mutation as identity. Bishop often sees it as responsibility and threat. That fear-based understanding of mutation becomes foundational to who he is later, especially after both he and Shard fully awaken their powers. Section 5. Awakening powers. Awakening and powers. Eventually, both Bishop and Shard awaken their mutant abilities through their XSE development and training. Shard developed her own unique abilities connected to phasing and energy projection, but Bishop's mutation almost feels psychologically symbolic, because Bishop absorbs energy and converts it into power. Most people simplify his abilities by saying he absorbs energy and shoots it back, but Bishop's power is much more versatile than that. He absorbs plasma, lasers, electricity, heat, radiation, and occasionally even mystical or psionic energy depending on the writer. Then he redirects that energy into enhanced strength, durability, healing, or devastating energy blast. Meaning the longer the combat continues, the more dangerous Bishop potentially becomes. And symbolically, that's basically Bishop's life. The more violence, pain, and trauma he absorbed, the stronger and more emotionally armored he became. Over time, Bishop stopped feeling like a superhero and started feeling like a weapon built by history itself, which is exactly why Trevor Fitzroy becomes such an important turning point. Section 6. Fitzroy and time travel. Eventually, Bishop learns about the events that destroyed the X-Men in his timeline, a traitor within the team. That mystery completely consumes him, because to Bishop, the collapse of mutant kind wasn't random. It came from weakness inside the X-Men themselves. Then one day, the mutant criminal, Trevor Fitzroy, escapes into the past. Now Fitzroy wasn't just another villain, he was dangerous enough to destabilize timelines entirely. And Bishop chases him through time into the present Marvel universe, which changes his life forever. Because for the first time, Bishop finally meets the actual X-Men, the people he grew up worshipping as legends. But instead of legends, he finds flawed human beings, people who argue, hide secrets, mistrust each other, make mistakes. And nobody represented that disappointed more than Gambit. Section 7. Bishop vs. Gambit. Bishop quickly becomes convinced Gambit is a future traitor responsible for destroying the X-Men. And honestly, from Bishop's perspective, Gambit looks suspicious as hell. Criminal connections, constant secrecy, moral ambiguity. But what makes this rivalry interesting isn't just a suspicion, it's ideology. Gambit survives through instinct, freedom, and improvisation. Bishop survives through structure, discipline, and control. Two men shaped by trauma, but responding to it completely differently. Bishop's obsession with preventing the future slowly starts evolving into paranoia, which becomes even more dangerous during the Onslaught era. During the Onslaught storyline, Bishop's worldview only becomes more validated, because suddenly the X-Men are facing one of the most catastrophic threats they've ever encountered. A psychic monster born from the darkest part of Charles Xavier and Magneto. And to Bishop, Onslaught represented proof that even the greatest heroes could become disasters. That fear had always existed inside him. Onslaught simply confirmed it, and that constant fear of catastrophic failure eventually pushes Bishop into the darkest chapter of his entire history, the Messiah Complex. Section 9. The Messiah Complex. After M-Day nearly wipes out mutant kind, the first mutant child is finally born, Hope Summers. To most mutants, Hope represented salvation, but to Bishop, Hope represented extinction. Bishop becomes convinced that Hope is directly connected to the dystopian future he survived, and this is where Bishop finally breaks psychologically, not because he's evil, but because fear finally consumes him completely. Everything Bishop experienced, the camps, the sentinels, the death, the oppression, the paranoia, the trauma, all of it leads to this moment. Because Bishop generally believes killing Hope is the only way to save the future, and that belief completely destroys him. Section 10. Messiah War. During Messiah War, Bishop transforms from paranoid survivor into obsession incarnate. He hunts Cable and Hope across timelines relentlessly like a machine, like a man who no longer knows how to stop. And over time, Bishop crosses the lines that no X-Man should. Mass casualties, biological attacks, innocent deaths, timeline destruction. At this point, Bishop stops behaving like a protector. He becomes a man trying to kill the future itself before it can happen again. And honestly, that's what makes this storyline tragic instead of cartoonishly evil. Because from Bishop's perspective, he's still saving the world. Section 11. Redemption. Eventually, Marvel began rebuilding Bishop through redemption arcs and modern X-Men stories. And whether or not the reader accepted the redemption, the attempt itself matters. Because Bishop was never written as pure evil. He was written as someone psychologically consumed by fear, a man shaped by oppression, war, survivalism, and paranoia. Someone who spent his entire life trying to stop extinction until trauma slowly transformed him into something almost unrecognizable. And honestly, that's why Bishop remains one of Marvel's most psychologically fascinating X-Men. Because beneath the powers and the time travel, Bishop is ultimately a warning about what happens when trauma becomes somebody's entire identity. Ending. Most X-Men fight for the future. Bishop fights because he already survived the version where they already lost. And maybe that's why, deep down, he never truly escaped it. But now we're gonna get into the reading recommendations to end this video. If you want to explore Bishop's story for yourself, start with Uncanny X-Men chapter 282, The XSE, which is 5 chapters long, The Times and Life of Lucas Bishop, which is 3 chapters. You could read the Messiah Complex, which will lead into the Messiah War, and the Hellfire Gala 2025 to start seeing where his redemption began with Cable.